fitness pal to do calorie count.
Is it telling you eat too much and drink too much, David?
Well, I didn't need an app for that. Welcome to Cloud Realities, an original podcast from Capgemini. And this week it's a conversation show exploring sustainability in the intelligence age. I'm Dave Chapman.
I'm Esmee van der Giezen.
And I'm Rob Kernahan.
And I'm delighted to say that this week, to get into that incredibly important subject, we've got Lewis Richards, the Microsoft Chief Sustainability Officer for the UK. Lewis, how are you doing? Good to see you.
Nice to see you all. Glad to be here.
Where are you joining us from today?
I'm hybrid working from my home in lovely, currently sunny Bury St Edmunds in Suffolk. I know I have a very Welsh lilt, but I'm in deepest, darkest Suffolk.
Very nice. And I noticed that you have got exactly the same colour walls as my lounge at home. I almost feel at home looking at that.
It's the worst paint colour for your listeners. Never pick this because you constantly spend time touching it up because you look at it and it scratches.
Look at that consumer advice. We barely even got going. It is dark. It's a sort of a dark midnight bluish sort of colour for those that are trying to imagine what that looks like.
It is quite intense.
Yeah, it is good. It's good. I like it. I like a bit of intensity.
Deep and stormy. It's like your personality, David.
Yeah, that's what it is, Robert.
Well, yours would be shallow and stormy. Sorry, I got that a bit wrong.
God, you're out with guns this morning.
on form today.
Yeah, how are you doing? You good?
Well, I'm all right. It's Friday again, so the weekend is almost here. It's about to land, so that's always. I always say the peak time on the weekend.
Always say.
That's what you know. What I always say, David. peak time on the weekend. The happiest point is when you're down tools for the day. It's very early evening. You get in there. You might be sitting down with a family for dinner. That's it. That's peak weekend, and then you get to Sunday evening and you get the butterflies in your tummy, and you go, "I've got to go back to school again."
I do think Fridays. I think I agree with you. I think Friday evening is peak weekend, isn't it?
That is it.
Weekend.
You can't beat the Friday evening.
If you're going to have like a big night, it's got to be the Friday, hasn't it? Because that then gives you there's nothing worse than a big night on a Saturday night, and then you're on your Sunday and you've wasted half your Sunday because you're not feeling great.
Uh-huh.
And then
this is it. This is my theory. Peak. You cannot beat Friday evening.
Ez, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree. And I actually missed you guys. You know that. We've spent quite some time in Barcelona together. I was actually looking forward to see you today.
Yeah, look at that.
Oh, there you go. Look at that.
Almost sound surprised.
The first time for everything, isn't it? Look at that. My words. Very good.
And you're in a box, Esmee, today.
Yeah, I'm in a box. Yeah, people say that I'm a quite out-of-the-box thinker, but I'm in the box this Friday. Yes, at the office.
Are they the ones that've got the ventilation in? Because if you sit in that box and the sun's shining in, they can get very warm very fast.
Do you know what they did? They actually removed the seats. They first had a seat that you could sit on it, but they actually removed them, so you can only stand in them.
That's madness.
That's like a strange torture.
What? That's that
it's
thing that
motivation to not keep,
It's better for your health.
The box.
It's better for your health, Esmee. Technically, it's better for your health. Sitting's a big killer.
But it's trying to do that thing that McDonald's did years ago, where they deliberately designed seats you can only sit on for 20 minutes. So you got in, and get out. Yeah.
Is that a thing?
That is a thing.
Really?
That is a thing to keep flow going. In sort of highly populated things, that all of the environment that's there is designed intentionally for you only there to be a certain amount of time. So standing, it's because they want you out of there in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah, so good job we're not doing a 3-hour record today, isn't it?
Lucky me.
Well, we can turn it into one if you want, David. Yeah. Just keep going. Just keep going until Esmee eventually faints. And then right, that's the podcast done then.
Slumping lower and lower on screen. Anyway, Robert, what's confusing you this week?
What's confusing me this week, David, it's shonky user interface design and how it continues to survive. So, and the reason this popped up was, I've been traveling a lot recently in far-flung destinations. I've had to install multiple taxi apps on my phone to get around the place.
Now, you've only just got your head around Uber, haven't you? So this
is a big leap, right? So, yeah. But it was like, there was one in Copenhagen I signed up to, and it was like, download the app, authenticate with Google. Where do you want to go? We'll use Google Pay. It was incredibly simple, right? I was probably 10 seconds in and it was all done. Right. This is the digital experience we should receive. It's like quick, bang, through. And there was another one, which shall remain nameless, in a country not so far away, where it took me about 15 minutes to enter in all the details, sign it up, get that, do that, validate account, this, that, and the other, and everything else. And I'm thinking, if you've designed that app, do you not look at your other apps that are like your competitors and stuff and go, well, we should probably copy that strategy?
I have a similar. I tell you what really annoys me these days is websites where you're trying to buy something that you just don't have an Apple Pay.
Yeah. It's like, why aren't you integrated with this? It's so much quicker.
This is like an API. It's like, that's better than you writing 4 pages of kind of putting my address and my birth town and like stuff like that. And it's like, what are you doing?
It's like Lime Bikes as well. I'd never interacted with that organization. You go up, scan a QR code, say, okay, I approve my Google integration, and they just let me take the bike and ride off. And you sort of think, you go to the alternatives like that, and you go, it's 4 pages of this and that and the other and details.
So I think, Robert...
Why? I'm confused, David. Why can't you be simpler? Why?
This is less of a confusion, more of a rant, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I suppose. Yes, okay. Yeah, it is. Like shonky user interface design. Please learn from those who have got it correct, and it's okay to copy. Because
am I going to have to change my little intro to this? To
Rob's rant about now. Rob's rant. Yeah, what are you going to rant about this way? Okay, I'll be so much. But it just confuses me why. You just go, but why have you not looked at others and gone, well, they've done it similar? The other one was the app to download. One of the apps was like 250 megs. And I'm like, that's just an unreasonable amount of data to have to download.
It's very rare that I can clear up your confusions, but this one I can completely clear up. It's pure incompetence, Robert. That's what it is. Pure
you have to use them. It's like,
No, it's the same with streaming platforms. Why is the navigation different? Why is the menu,
TV interfaces. Oh, don't get me started on that.
That's one for another day, I think. Let's move on before we just get into full rant.
just rant for an hour about bad user interface design.
Reminds me of my blog post. I used to run a blog back in the early 2000s called Things I Hate in the World. And it was kind of like, it was just like literally that.
That's brilliant.
Infinite resource.
Is it still there? Can I read it? It feels like I need one of those.
It was on blogspot.com. I think it's on the Internet Archive. It's the thing is around there. It's just literally me ranting about technology and things that used to annoy me, basically.
You should be on this podcast every time at the beginning with this, because this is the bit about why is it like this?
Yeah.
Well, look, on that note, let's turn to our core subject of the day. So why don't we start with CRI report, Developing Sustainable Gen I. Set out what's in that report, Lewis, and why you think it's significant.
I think at the moment it's just because it's the zeitgeist of the moment, isn't it? Sort of generative AI when we talk about that. And I think there's a lot of interest in it, obviously, because that kind of Pandora's box has been opened, I think, in terms of the technology. I had a look at our Microsoft's AI Foundry platform that customers can use to run generative AI models. I had a look at it a couple of days ago just to see how many generative AI models are in there, and there's 1,867 models.
No way.
In the Foundry now, of open source ones, closed system ones, because lots of people are creating these things and releasing them, Meta, Microsoft, there's all these kind of things coming out.
It's a tremendous increase though, because we saw Foundry released at Ignite last November. And it wasn't in its thousands at that point, I don't think.
It's hundreds, though, wasn't it? That's hundreds.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think the challenges around that then is obviously it's that balance between the kind of the way that we as humans consume news has changed. So lots of people's news comes via Instagram, X. Well, I mean, if you even stay on X these days.
Phony baloney stories about the pyramids that people might believe.
Yeah, potentially.
For that.
Who would have fallen for that? I mean, that is ridiculous.
I know. So there's things like that, but I think the problem is that because we live in this 10-second soundbite piece of the world, and it's very easy for people to misunderstand potentially the link between generative AI, power, resource usage, sustainability. And it's like any other technology. It doesn't run on yogurt pots and string. It runs on a compute platform. And the judicious use of it to drive or build solutions or outcomes which are, more sustainable in nature requires you to understand what model you're using, what outcome you're trying to get to, what data you're ruling over it, what's the inference patterns, who's going to use it, that kind of thing. So I think from a sustainability point of view, there's two aspects. One is that there's undoubtedly things we're seeing from the reporting about where these AI tools can be used at a macro level to develop things that are going to help sustainability, biodiversity, material science, that kind of stuff. The flip side of that then is the internal kind of use of it by companies like that is how do you actually start to leverage and use those technologies, and understand the impact that has on your resource usage from a sustainability point of view as well. So it's a bit of a balance in that, really.
So it feels like it's almost like pre and post Gen AI sustainability thinking, isn't it? Like it felt like we had a broadly decent handle on what net zero cloud might ultimately need to be, kind of the scale of data center processing that's going to be required to support that and how that can be offset. And then post Gen AI, it's changed the game, hasn't it, in terms of how we think about sustainability?
Yeah, I think so. I also pick into it a little bit though as well. I think there's been a conflation that the growth of data centers and energy usage is solely down to generative AI. And I'd argue that a little bit. I don't think that's quite the case. I think if you look at, and again, this comes back to the way that humans, it's like our time frames for everything have shrunk. We don't study history, or we don't think of anything with any kind of time scale. It's all no. And I think when you talk about data centers, these things take a long time to build, potentially. And they also are designed to last for 20, 30 years. I mean, they're capital build projects. So if you look at the pattern of planned development for data centers globally by data center companies, that kind of stuff, that hasn't just suddenly appeared overnight or ramped up just because of generative AI. I'd argue that probably the increase in data centers of the plan for them is around our profligate inability to control how much data we create as humans. Data drives the demand for digitization. And if you think about generative AI, all it's really doing is it's a lens into that data. It's making it easier for us as humans to basically find and create new content from that data because it understands the social graph kind of stuff as well. But really so I think you do see a shift in terms of like the type of data centers that have been built in terms of how much they are AI GPU enabled data centers. That is starting to grow up. But the overall build of them, I wouldn't say is only because of generative AI, if that makes sense.
And I think there's a very good point about digital litter in there, about how much smartphones are just pushing data to the cloud. I would want to create an algorithm that goes around and deletes every firework video ever taken, because I've got a theory that nobody ever watches a fireworks video back, but yet you're at a big display and there must be 1,000 people taking 4K video, and that all has to be stored somewhere with a carbon footprint, and it is that social responsibility associated with your own personal footprint that's digital is very large these days.
But that's that dichotomy between the kind of personal learning digital skills and understanding versus when you work for a corporation as well. It's very easy to point fingers at businesses, providers, these things. What are you doing about this?
Yeah.
What are you doing? But then by the same token, we went on holiday last year with our friends, and our friend's daughter and her boyfriend came. So we went to Greece for like 10 days. And I came back and I'd probably taken, 50 photographs in the 10 days, that kind of stuff. I watched Summer and Ethan taking photographs, and Summer and Ethan would take 200 photographs to get one photograph to put on their Instagram profile. They got no conception because they're not, and this is the thing, because no one's biologically equipped to see the digital world around them. What you have is that thing walking around it. We still daftly call a phone. I mean, I don't use it for phone calls. It hasn't been a phone for years. Yeah. But they take in 200 photographs in that, and I know for a fact that she's got Apple photographs and she's got Google photographs and I think so. Those 200 images of high resolution imagery is being streamed, every single one of those, up to the cloud and backed up. But that linking of the impact that you have behavior wise, because you can't see it, it's very hard for humans, I think, to conceptualize kind of their responsibility around that creation of data, that exhaust, you know what I mean? And I used to do it years back before I joined Microsoft, when I used to my old job. I used to talk to CIOs about this idea of people's capacity and confidence to use everyday technology that surrounds them, that kind of stuff. And one of the simple tests is you say to people, how many apps have you got installed on your phone? And I guarantee you, in a room of 200, you could have 300 people in a conference. You might find one person who's got even a semblance. Most people don't even know where to look on their phone.
Let's test that.
Do you see what I mean?
Let's test that theory right now, shall we? Because I'm going to say I'm one of the people that I no idea. But I haven't got very many. I'm relatively contained. You know, I'm coming your way, Robert.
I know, but I can tell you exactly.
I knew it.
Not exactly, but I can tell you. So I've got 4 pages, and it's about 7x4. So yeah,
any foldering going on there?
No, I don't folder.
No,
I don't.
Folder. So I've got.
I use search to find my app.
Do you?
I'm like a modern person who doesn't have to constantly scroll and locate an app. I just put 3 letters into the search and it pops up for me.
I think that's the interesting thing with the AI piece about it. If you think about it, though, what the AI is doing is it's disintermediating, or I can't say the word. It's breaking up even more the paradigm of the way that humans interact with the technology. Because we've been very much a thumb-driven type tap. You have to control type tap, that kind of stuff. But because of the generative language capability of generative AI, even though lots of people aren't using it that way yet, people still aren't natively talking directly to, even though that you can. But because it's doing more work for you, it understands what you want to do, and you can ask the question. You as a human are getting that kind of, probably a better kind of output from that kind of stuff. But it's obfuscating you as a human further and further away from an understanding of how to do stuff. I used to talk to people about, like, if you're thinking about skills you need to teach people moving forward, there's 2 things really: critical thinking skills and imagination skills. You have to be able to analyze and think and understand what these generative AI tools are telling you with some kind of critical lens, in terms of understanding, looking at the sources. Is it real? How do you, before you just go and post something? And the imagination skills bit is, I think, still as a human, it's even more of an imperative that you've got to be able to hold in your head a mental picture of what these things are doing, where data sits and how it works, that kind of stuff as well. Because, that's the challenge with it.
Let's maybe explore then. That's a really nicely set up sort of current state of the world where we are in. We're in the beginnings of the intelligence age. We know intelligence age compute, whether it be the data stored, whether it be the processing power to handle it, is, I don't know whether it's quite exponentiating, but it's certainly at a different level than we were understanding power consumption even 5 years ago. Then you've got this disintermediation issue with how people are personally using tech, as well as how organizations are using tech. Yeah. So how on earth do you make sense of that from a sustainability point of view? Has it reframed the way we were thinking about it, say, 5 years ago?
Yeah, from my point of view, as well as being like kind of sustainability lead at Microsoft, I think there's a couple of things. I think reporting compliance and rules and regulations have been like an enabler for raising the bar or the profile of sustainability as an issue inside organizations. I think that's been a thing. I think, though, it's gone to the point, though, inside of organizations where it's become just about reporting and compliance to a certain degree, because of, it's become just like any other kind of reporting function, which is led by, we've got to get a report out on this day, and everything goes around just capturing data. So
last year we were at 69.9%. This year we're going to get to 71.2%.
And someone can press the magic button because they've got to do a report and push that stuff out then. And what that does, I think, is it basically fosters the wrong kind of behaviors inside an organization, because it becomes a pillar, reporting and compliance pillar on its own. So all the pillars inside the business, legal, customer service, HR, finance, whatever it is, they all know that they do a sustainability report and they capture data, but there's no ownership necessarily, or there's not enough ownership by the business, because they know someone else is taking care of it, because it's a retrospective, this is what we did last year report type of thing. And there's been some, I think we live in a very, febrile environment at the moment. It doesn't matter what kind of topic you pick, politics, religion, this kind of stuff at the moment. And one of the things, the impacts we're seeing in almost real time, is certain retrenchment around things like DEI, around sustainability, this kind of stuff, because of political changes in, around the world. And one of the things that's had an impact on, if you like, the European Union has had the gold standard of sustainability reporting, really, with the CR094 templates they've been doing. But with their omnibus update in the last sort of like month, 6 weeks, I think that's cut in something like 80% of the companies that were going to have to do mandatory CSRD reporting is now, they've shifted to being voluntary. So you could look at that and go, oh, well, that's bad, because it means sustainability, people are taking their foot off the gas around doing it. But I also think it's an opportunity as well, though, because whilst it's only been about reporting and compliance, it means we're not using the data that we're capturing from the businesses as a transformational positive thing, because we're just using it to capture to us a report about what we did. The same data set is the same stuff that we want to be applying AI and process change to how are you actually going to transform your business units, your functions towards a net zero goal? So I think, if anything, it's going to give people a bit more headspace to probably think productively about how to move it forward, as opposed to just being retrospective.
You call out, though, one of the biggest issues with bad corporate organizational design, which is accountability and where it lies and how it's threaded through the organization. So if I'm not accountable for it, I don't think about it. Therefore, I just consume, and that consumption drives it. So to do that, I think some organizations need to really think hard about how they're wired. And there's a change of that wiring to be able to get the outcome that we seek. A classic one, similar, is if I don't pay for the consumption of my compute, I don't care. And what you find is the organization misuses that consumption because they don't have to think about it because they don't get the bill at the end of the month. It's the same thing with carbon. If I'm not pushed to think about it, then it's not present in my mind, and I might not target its reduction. So I think there's a long way to go for corporate organization design to be able to cope with the types of things that you're talking about.
I completely agree. And at Microsoft, I mean, I wouldn't say we're unique, but I mean, we have a corporate carbon tax that is levied on the business units so that we have a carbon per ton dollar value, basically. So it incentivizes our business units to transform, to use less resources, because they have to basically then they contribute less to the bottom line that we use to fund our decarbonisation efforts. It's one of the streams used for funding. But if you think about most organisations, and I say that loosely, most organisations, what in my 25 years in IT kind of thing, and working around the place, what typically happens is the business use credit cards and go product shopping, and they buy applications, and every now and again they throw them at the CIO and go, "You've got to manage that now. Oh, and there's no more money for your budget to manage it, and it better not fall over."
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? And this is kind of to your point about consumption and this awareness piece. That ownership then is challenging, because even if you do like cloud migration work and you move from a private data center to a public cloud, and the CIO has made the business case for sustainability to move from one to the other, it's going to be more efficient, more effective, more agility, that kind of thing. 99% of the time, though, 99% of the business have no idea where the stuff was running beforehand.
Yeah.
And now they have no idea where it's running now. So they're removed from that kind of connective tissue to it. It struck me the other day, actually. We had our AI tour in London last week. There's like 5,000 people came to the Excel to come and do it. And a guy I work with, Tom, one of our Azure ninjas, does our virtual data center tours. So we take people around, it's like a virtual data center. And in his slide deck, he was showing about 50 people in the audience, and he put up photographs of data center complexes to show people this is what they look like, this kind of stuff. And I was just sat there and watching people in the audience nodding, and everybody's taking photographs of the data centers in Dublin. And I got off and I thought to myself, next time I'm going to swap out his images and put in a Tesco distribution center and just get him to stand up and go, "That's Dublin South," or something like for Microsoft. Because it's a box. Do you see what I mean? It doesn't. There's no human connectivity to that thing in reality, and I think that's kind of where we have to work harder to get people to understand those connections.
I would say just generally, Rob, you talk about firework videos, but I always think when I look at people taking photos of anything at those corporate conferences, I'm like,
never looking at that again.
I'd rather watch a firework video to start with, and then secondly, I bet they're looked at less than a firework video, aren't they?
Yeah.
Especially one of a data center.
Looking from a tech industry perspective, is it also a little bit cannibalistic? Because I hear you say you want to reduce the use of apps and tech, and on the other hand, you're one of the largest tech firms.
But this is the thing, though, right? So businesses that are capital driven, we're in the business to make money ultimately, that right? But it's a responsibility point of view. So the question then becomes, how do you create value? How do you drive economic growth? How do you transform businesses so that consumption of those services probably rises up? You do it in a sustainable manner. And I think the opportunity, just as an example, I think you look at there's a demand at the moment for anytime there's a front end application in the business that touches people and data, there's a demand at the moment, because most people have had, this generative AI thing, that people want to bake generative AI into that thing because they'll productivity gains, benefits, whatever they think is going to be. The challenge there, though, becomes our job is to provide those capabilities from a platform point of view as efficiently and as effectively as humanly possible, and to help customers to use those efficiently and effectively from the right model, the right energy, that kind of stuff, right? But it goes back to the age-old thing. It's business transformation, digital transformation. If that's your existing footprint from an energy resource usage point of view on your front-end application, and you're bolting AI onto the top of it, right? You might get productivity gains, output gains, that kind of stuff, which are economic, but there's no way you're going to make it from a resource point of view better by bolting something on, unless you take the opportunity to refactor the application. If you use, this is kind of thing like we're doing at the moment. So if you take things like the Green Software Foundation, right, which Microsoft, we're part of that as well, in the Green Software Foundation equation, there's kind of, there are patterns in place and principles in place about how you reform and refactor software to optimize it for green computing, right? So the challenge then becomes like, how do you get the business owners who don't want you to touch their front end application at all? How does CIOs and the data and the sort of developer teams convince them to work together to say, if we modernize your application, even if it's a couple of years old, if you modernize it and we use AI to actually help the developers to modernize it, right? So like one of the things we've done over the last couple of months is we've taken all of the Green Software Foundation principles and practice, which is all available on the internet, and we've grounded the latest OpenAI reasoning model against that and created an AI, a green assisted coding bot. We did it as part of our global hack. But then the developers, then, if you're refactoring the application, you throw code at it, tell me how to do it, what should I do? It's all about shortening the time and helping the developers speed up how they transform the application. But if you could measure the front end application and refactor it and move it to an energy footprint which was less, you give yourself the headroom to add in the AI function, the Copilot function, whatever it's going to be on top of that, hopefully without making it additively worse than it was before, but making it economically or potentially output more productive. You see what I mean? But that's a harder thing to do than just bolting on technology to existing applications. It requires more partnership between business owners who don't like change as much as they demand change. They don't necessarily want to have things change in their space. You know?
As a paradigm, it sort of reminds me a little bit of the journey that cybersecurity has gone on over the last 20 or 30 years, where there was a constant frustration in that community of, you don't really contact us until like the final gate before go live, and then we put our hand up and say it's not secure, and all of a sudden we're the problem. It feels like that, doesn't it? That this is a thread that should just be in every conversation right from the outset.
Yeah, I think for me as well, it's like I'm a massive believer in kind of empowerment for an education, digital skills for end users across the business, and I think there's a real difference between running training courses for people once or twice, this kind of stuff, and then ticking the box and going, right, everybody can now use that to the best of it, the technology's ability, because it's not, because we're humans and we are very, very driven by habit. Before I joined Microsoft, and I was outside my researching world, I'd argue it probably took Microsoft, or it took people 10 years to press the share button in PowerPoint to change their behavior, rather than downloading a file to their laptop and then creating an email and having an attachment. And I argue
Rob still hasn't got his head around it. he sends me attachments.
Yeah, but I'd argue no that, even though the whole point about those files being back to OneDrive, and the OneDrive, the way it works, the way it's designed to work, to be collaborative, I'd argue no that people still will go work on a file in the browser in PowerPoint, saved in OneDrive, they know it's being backed up, they go to do an email to send it, they put the link in, and it puts a link in, and they go, oh, I don't want to do that. They download, and then they'll download a copy and attach it and send it anyway.
Do you hear that, Robert?
Habit. Do you see what I mean?
PowerPoint in the browser. Did you hear that, Robert? In the browser.
When there is functional parity, I will embrace that
for
model.
Rob's advanced slide design.
When you've got skills with a Z, you need the full functionality. That's all I'm saying.
I'm kind of joking a little bit, but if you think about it, like if I go back, you go back like 2 years and you look at low code and automation, right? And the way that the products are designed to interoperate. The products have been designed to interoperate that for years. Yeah. And I think the promise of things like Power Automate and Flow and these kind of things, the Zapiers of the world, if this, then that. So the early versions before they became corporate tools, that kind of stuff. The idea was that you as a human would understand enough about your business processes that you could build your own automations in a low code, drag and drop environment, that kind of stuff. Now you'd argue how successful that's been. If you think about what the AI is doing at the moment though, right? There's the process that's been in the process for years, and AI is here on the end. And that's not because AI is, but that's the kind of way we're using it. What we're not necessarily doing enough of, I don't think, is helping people to kind of understand, why is the process the way the process is inside your organization, inside your function. And I guarantee you go back into asking enough questions, it's because Jeff built a PowerPoint, an Excel 10 years ago with macros in it.
Classic
and
Jeff.
The corporate scar tissue that's built up around that macro-enabled Excel that's the way we do things.
Bloody Jeff. Bloody Jeff, but his terrible business processes.
But I think the point is, like, unless you enable people to have the confidence and the skills and the capability to unpick the processes as a collective, as an individual, you're never going to get the best out, I don't think, of these AI tools or the automation tools and this kind of stuff, because it's always at the edge rather than it being, refactoring everything.
So it feels like the argument for deep modernization is just strengthening over time. So it's been here for a while, hasn't it, in the sense of the move from client server to cloud, and the ways of working and the way you can do finance around all of that is very different to the sort of tech that at least some of us on this call grew up with. How you fund it, how you manage it, how you work it, how fast you can move, all that sort of stuff. And this layer that you just describing, they're both the performance aspects of it. So AI built into processes, not just tagged on at the end, but like all the way through. But the sustainability plus points of doing that properly, it just seems to get more and more compelling, doesn't it? And the only bit missing, I think, from the argument we've been having is then connecting that to business results. So, and there is some natural connection there, I think, if you can get into that, particularly if sustainability is something you're measuring as something you care about as a business.
Yeah, and I think we're at that tipping point again now, because it's moving so fast, this kind of world as well at the moment. I think most people at the moment, their interaction with these generative AI tools and how they use things are kind of what I class as like almost like one shot at the moment. It's a very much like you pull up an app up or whatever it's on your phone or device and you ask it a question and it gives you an answer back. You might ask a number of questions, right? But we're rapidly moving towards this, and I don't like using buzzword bingo, that kind of stuff, but this agentic world, which is agents and agents. So where AI is talking to AIs, and you're getting basically it's workflow processing, but AI driven independent agents talking to each other, that kind of stuff. And that has a knock-on effect in terms of the human understanding, but has a knock-on effect in terms of the energy, the power, the usage, the sustainability, because, it's not just one inference that you could measure from me asking a question and then try to get some rough estimation back of what was the energy or resource footprint of that. You might have multiple chain of thought agents working off in systems as well. It's becoming harder to quantify when it's out of your control. Do you know what I mean? In terms of that flow? There's
a lot for many to learn about the high agency version of what you describe there, which is like it's adaptive, it's proactive. It doesn't always produce the same result like a human wouldn't, and it's autonomous, but it can do something that is complex. And I think if you take something like agentic, which has only been here for really 6 months in the corporate mindset, a lot of people still don't understand that level of agency that can be delivered by it. However, it'll be a couple of good use cases pop in. Everybody is seeing is believing. They realize the power of it, and I think it'll take off. What we need to see is that killer use case done somewhere that's everybody can get, and then bang, you're off. And you can talk about it as the personal agentic world, which is you describe to an agent what you want for a holiday. It goes talks to a load of others and it comes back and you say book, versus the corporate, we can replace our ERP system with agents, which I'm still waiting for. And I know Dave will cheer the day that happens.
Ripple of applause in the background.
That is the time, it's at the core. When it hits the core of how we are, I think that'll be really exciting.
And at the same time, I also want to add something more pragmatic. I've just had PI planning sessions, and I still hear a lot of teams now going more and more into facing legacy systems, virtual machines, etc. And they also look into what is the footprint of keeping this alive or not. So I hear that on a developer level in PI planning, and that makes me, I think, also very proud. In general, for all our developers, that it's also in the minds and hearts of them as well. In the end, they're the ones influencing which futures are going to be created.
It's like recycling, yeah? So when recycling kicked in probably 20 years ago now, everybody was very alien to it and, it wasn't there. But now everybody separates their rubbish, they wash it out. The vast majority of us try and do the right thing, but it takes quite a number of years for it to become just what
ingrained
we do.
In habit.
And habit forming. And the thing is about breaking the scar tissue, and I like that phrase, which is that we're used to something. It takes quite a while to, change that, how we operate type thing.
Corporate inertia is one of the biggest things in the world, isn't it, really? Because, any industry you go to, especially as well, I think, doesn't matter what kind of new technology comes on, the first 6 months to a year, you go to every new industry and they go, oh, that's really exciting, but it won't impact us. Literally, I mean, I'm on my 5th or 6th cycle of that, where new technology is launched, where you go to people saying, oh yeah, but what we do is special, we're unique. Yeah. Oh, okay. You know,
you just wait. Yeah, let's have this conversation in 5 years' time when the startup's just beaten you. Yeah.
You know, so it's the same. It's the same thing. It's the same pattern that goes around and around and around again. You'd think we'd probably get better at spotting the fact that it's a repeating pattern and we'd be more aware of it, really. But you
would think so, wouldn't you? I mean, you made a point earlier about we don't look at history anymore. Everything's in the last 6 months or a year. But actually, in the speed of technology right now, I'm not advocating for a second we shouldn't look at history. We really should as a human race, frankly. But the sort of the need to adapt as businesses, that cycle time is getting smaller and smaller and smaller the whole time. So you make a really good observation there, because you would think the penny would have dropped at this point, wouldn't you?
But it's the classic where you are. There's a bit about this, which is where are you in your career and how's it going to impact you, right? So if you're more than halfway through your career, AI will have a different impact on you to say if you're at the beginning of your career. So let's take the paralegal, right? So you take the paralegal, you say, how do you learn your trade to become a lawyer? You have to experience it. However, AI technology can do a lot of the heavy lifting that a paralegal does for those firms today. So how does somebody get started in that world now? And considering what they're facing versus, say, somebody who started in it 20 years ago. And it's this, so the people who run the organizations don't see it because they never experienced it. But the people coming into the organization probably are more acutely aware. And I think there's this corporate blindness that occurs down that they don't really perceive it. And so they're slow to act. And you get that inertia point, which is actually, how do you educate that tier to understand that it's radically different?
I think it's the other thing for me as well is that it's that kind of, it's the skill set and the muscle and the kind of capabilities organizations have around strategy as well. And I think the tools that they use, that kind of stuff, is because I don't know, I'm still amazed how much SWOT analysis goes on, or PESTLs go on, and this kind of stuff, as well as tools, right? Which are, when you look at, strategy mapping and the actual, as a discipline of actually being able to kind of plot out and get people to coordinate, even like things like, go back to like, John Boy OODA loop and this kind of stuff. Observe, orient, decide, act. It's amazing, kind of interesting to see kind of like just how flexible organizations really are when it comes to strategy, and aren't just like led by, I don't know, Gartner hype cycles or the latest thing that's come out from a report point of view as well. Because you don't see a lot of, you don't necessarily see a lot of that kind of evidence that people are massively adept at strategy.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
We talk a lot about not only that issue, but the nature of strategy and how businesses should leverage it as a tool has changed so much in the last 5 years, where you could write a strategy. I'm sure everyone on this call has written 3-year strategies in their time. I know I have written a number of them. And that used to be fine when that was the speed of the world. But the speed of the world now, it's like you're lucky if your strategy withstands about a 6 to 8 month kind of series of cycles. So the nature of strategy has gone from sort of plan and then act and manage to plan, much more to act, see what happens, and then have a response and an adaptation strategy. And that shift from like one way of acting to another way of acting, that hasn't happened as fast as I would have liked to have seen that happen.
You do see that in pockets. I think you see it in pockets in organizations, that sense and respond. It's a different mindset as well that's really needed, talking about different generations. I think the younger generation has that more naturally and intuitively. And you see that in pockets. And I think the way to move forward in transformation is to really help those pockets, keep their energy, remove obstacles that are in their way, and then see if you can create new and different other pockets that do the same. And then once they're, that level of gravity is shifting, then you can all go into more larger pockets that help each other out. But I think there's no one suits all.
You do see that with sustainability as well. I think there's a certain amount of, I don't know whether it's a thing, but there's safety in numbers, isn't there? Or like meme copying. And you look at those macro patterns. I think like if you look post COP in Paris, everybody rushed to basically get a sustainability plan that was going to be verified by SBTi or CDP. There was a big rush towards everybody doing the same thing, like, this EcoVadis stamp. It was like a tick box or a badge of approval. And I think what you're starting to see is, and this is just my opinion, I think, in terms of this, there's, been 9 months into observing it, kind of thing, in my current role. As soon as it becomes hard, in terms of actually being able to manage it, people are then shifting around, and patterns change in terms of, you have to be able to react in terms of, well, we've been putting all our money and our focus into this effort around thing, but now we're going to shift it and we're going to put levers elsewhere as well. You have to have that dynamism, to your point, Esmee, I think, to react to kind of things that aren't working necessarily, rather than just meme copying and sticking with the same thing, really. And I think there's a lot of that in the sustainability space at the moment. Like, it's like the bit, when it's been led by reporting and compliance for, like, things scope 3 being quite hard, this kind of thing where the bigger organizations sit in the middle and just send out spreadsheets demanding information from their suppliers, knowing full well they're not going to be able to give them 100% of the data because they can't at the moment. How long do you keep at the endless ping pong of back and forth, without trying something different, or trying some different kind of partnership or some approach to what you're trying to measure to help people to move forward,
So maybe just to bring our conversation today to a bit of a conclusion, what would be the 2 bits of advice you would give? One to the organizational body, and then one to the individual, in terms of, in the intelligence age that we are now moving into, where we're seeing some of the differences and impacts that we were describing earlier. What are those 2 bits of advice, just to bring it to a conclusion?
If I start with the individual, I think it's the self-reflection and self-awareness is a key skill that needs to be taught to everybody. And the fact that every single one of us has to start to think about, how are we going to perform higher value tasks, higher value human tasks, this kind of stuff, because any kind of work that you do at the moment is going to be disrupted by some form of generative AI. So that to move forward and be successful, everybody has to have enough self-awareness and the kind of that critical thinking, or that skills awareness, to think about, how am I going to, on a daily basis, raise the bar and do something that's a higher value task as a human being. And I think that's, for me, is the kind of the key thing for individuals. That kind of stuff is, how do you do that as an individual? And that's quite a hard thing to do, I think, when you work inside organizations, and training and development is given to you. It's not something, and that shift has to be something where you seek out training and development, as opposed to mandatory training and development. That culture of being in a state of constant newbie, where you're constantly learning, and that's quite a hard thing for people to do, because it's a change to their practices. I think from an organization point of view, if I look at like that transformation power, I think there's a responsibility for organizations to help. How do they help foment that? But also how do they help increase the kind of awareness, I think, of just how the world works. How does the world work from an outside context for them as an organization? This digital world that we live in, I think that organizations who could do a much better job of trying to educate people about just how the modern world actually works, that kind of stuff. I think raising people's just overall awareness of the entire world, everybody would benefit from that, I think, to be honest. It's like, I'll leave it on this one. It's like the Morlock on the Eli from H.G. Wells' Time Machine, that kind of stuff, right? So like, are you going to worship the big stone head that's just going to give you food, all that kind of stuff? Or are you going to be the super beings, but you overly rely on technology as well, kind of stuff? There's the balance between the Morlock and the Eli. Which one do you want to be?
What have you been looking at?
Well, it's not far from the attachment of Rob or SharePoint or pushing a button. I wanted to talk about, and I'm guilty, let's start with that, to have a digital bin in my mailbox. Mm-hmm. I never really delete stuff, because you never know, if I, accidentally deleted it. So my trash bin is very, very crowded in my Outbox email. But if you look into the physical waste in our, I'm not saying it's in our organization, but I think we've seen quite some organizations that we separate all our trash, in 5 or 6 different categories, which also makes me confused. Talking about confused, Rob, like, is this plastic? Is this, what type of waste is this? But then in the end, you see the cleaning company come by and they all, outside, they put it in one large bin. So yes, yes, we have those bins in place, but it's a broken system. But what if you look into that digital folder and use what they call an organizational constellation? Have you ever done that? Constellation could also be on a personal level.
I've done constellations, like human constellations.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
What? Hey, you're gonna have to extract. I'm sorry, this is a new. I'm being educated. Please explain.
Dave, can you share something about if you're talking about a human one?
Yeah, so at least the one I've done, I hope this is in the same space, is where, like, let's say you're a team, and you're in a room like on an off-site sort of situation. You've got some sort of coach. That's generally the scenario in which I've done it. What the coach does is they get the team to stand around and represent certain aspects of the organizational system that you're dealing with. So, and let's say you're the person that's trying to understand a complex political situation or system situation. You physically stand in the middle of the room, and other humans represent either themselves or other people or bits of the organization. And the orientation that you have to each other physically is a representation of what's going on. So let's say you're dealing with a politically difficult person who's not engaging with you, that, the representative would have their back to you, and they might be stood 100 yards away instead of like where you need them right next to you. So in the sort of physical manifestation of it, you get your head around like, it just gives you a window into like what's actually happening here. And then you see the system physically represented. Is that what you had in mind, Des?
Absolutely, yeah. And what if we put digital waste as a constellation? I even done it with like a Lego minifigs. So on a table, you can do the same.
Yeah.
You don't have to be in a large room, but you can do it. It's just to have a conversation to make things visible.
You're making a physical twin representation of your communication pathways, basically.
But also you can have like a minifig that's the user, so that's me. I'm afraid to delete my files, but you can also have like some other representation, doesn't matter what, for the digital trash bin or the unconscious sphere that I have, which is in the back of my head, and maybe even something else is influencing that sphere. Maybe the legal department or the security department, and then you map out that entire system. And even if you think about it, how complex it would be in the IT department, they're going to say, you need to clean this up, or we have this CSR report. It's also pushing. But you can imagine how complicated it is just by talking about just small individual examples.
And this is your personal issue with the fact that you're concerned about deleting things, or is this something you think would have like a wider application somehow?
No, I think it can, if we map out these different huge challenges, you can see how complex the system is. So can you imagine if this is already complex, how can we have those huge challenges that we have in one constellation? I think that's, we talk about it even in this episode as well. It's all those silos that Lewis was also referring to, like the different departments. But in the end, it's one big system that's influencing each other.
I used to work with a guy called Simon Wardley, who's developed something called Wardley mapping, which you might have heard of that. So Wardley mapping is a fantastic strategy mapping tool. But the purpose of the maps are never complete and they're never perfect.
Yeah,
but what maps are very good at doing is drawing out that kind of evolutionary picture to understand the value chain, which is what you're talking about, Esmee. But the real power for them is you get them to do, like if you imagine your constellation, you do maps for functions sometimes. But imagine them like, do you remember like the old school projectors we used to put it in school?
Overhead projectors, come on.
OHPs,
there's Rob. There's Rob.
There you go. Back in the day, right?
Those were the days.
The good thing about an OHP was you could layer things on top of OHPs to build the picture.
Yeah, they were quite cool.
And that's what we do with strategy maps and Wardley maps, is you overlay maps on top of each other because you're trying to see through the depth of the complexity of the strategies of each function to look for patterns and areas of things like that. This is normally when you do them across sort of ERP transformation, you suddenly find that an organization's got 800 different SAP environments and stuff because they've all got their own. It's like that kind of function, really. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Did you see the way that Rob perked up there when we talked about nostalgia?
He left the building when we were talking about constellations.
Human interactions, no interest whatsoever.
I love a bit of retro nostalgia. I have a whole thing of I build old computers and things like that on and virtualization emulation. I love to go back and relive it. So when you said over a projector, it took me straight back to school.
Yeah, right back in a minute.
It's like,
It would be excellent actually to do a
times,
presentation at a
times.
tech conference, but using another.
With an OHV, that would actually be quite cool. They're going old school. They just swap the slide over, and then you can annotate the slide and take it over.
Yeah.
You could do that because you could drop another acetate on top and draw on top, and then it's like, we've lost a bit of that with recent digital tooling, isn't it? A bit more complicated.
But look, thank you for that, and Lewis, thanks for your time today and such an involving conversation. It's great to see you.
And you guys.
Now, we end every episode of this podcast by asking our guests what they're excited about doing next. And that could be, I've got something exciting booked to do with my family at the weekend, or it could be something in your professional life, or maybe a little bit of both. So, Lewis, what are you excited about doing next?
Mine's a bit kind of thing. I'm a bit of a fitnessy kind of biohackery type of thing as well. So I'm training for the CrossFit Open has just finished. I'm a bit of a CrossFit cult member. So we've just finished our global competition, but I'm now moving on to another High Rocks event. So High Rocks is the latest kind of fitnessy kind of race thing. And myself and my friend Mandy, my training partner, did one, and we're training now for our second one to see if we can beat our previous score.
What does High Rocks involve?
So High Rocks is a fitness race. So it's 8 1-kilometer runs, and each 1 kilometer run is broken up by a functional fitness station. So you might run a K together, and then you do like 1,000 meters on a row. Then there's another K, then you're back in, and it's like sort of 100 wall balls, and then there's lunges, squats, that kind of stuff as well. So it's quite massively growing in popularity. There was the event in Glasgow last weekend. I think had 40,000 people.
I hear
there
a lot
for 3 days
talking about it. Yeah,
but they've just they're doing the first one in Wales at the end of April. Start of May, basically, in the actual Millennium Stadium, in the Principality Stadium. It's going to be inside the Welsh Stadium, so we're going to try and get tickets for that. I think that's my next plan.
Well, we wish you a huge amount of luck for that, and thanks again for joining us today.
No worries.
If you would like to discuss any of the issues on this week's show and how they might impact you and your business, please get in touch with us at cloudrealities@capgemini.com. We're all on LinkedIn. We'd love to hear from you, so feel free to connect and DM if you have any questions for the show to tackle. And of course, please rate and subscribe to our podcast. It really helps us improve the show. A huge thanks to Lewis, our sound and editing wizards Ben and Louie. A good luck to all people in Kaproon being faced with our producer Marshall on skis. And of course, thanks to all our listeners. See you in another reality next week.